population today must see itself now as a nation. And instead now of merely trying to educate children for jobs that do not exist, the African American nation in America must come to create jobs. It must now make jobs. The children now must be trained not for jobs, but be trained to become employers and job creators. The children now must be trained to take the economic infrastructure, which is in the hands of other groups, away from those other groups, so that they can gain the wealth that's in those businesses. Not only then must the African American community take over its economic infrastructure, and yes, I mean move Koreans out. Yes, I'm very upfront about that. And I mean move any other ethnic group out. It's not exclusive to Koreans. You either got a choice. You're going to give your money away and let other people cart it out and feed their children while your own starve and go into crime and criminality and suffer, or you're going to use your own money to feed your own children. This is not a statement of hatred against Koreans or a statement of hatred against the other people. It's not a statement of hatred. It's a statement of love. It says you love your children enough to see that you spend your money in a way that they can be the primary beneficiaries of it. You understand? It has nothing against the other people. It's for yourself. You don't owe other people a living. You do not owe the Koreans a living. There's nothing that says you owe them a living. As I've said before, I've seen black men die on the soil of Korea. I've seen black tax money go to fight wars in Korea. I've seen black tax money go and build highways and build the Korean industrial infrastructure. I've seen black money in the armies and the navies that protected South Korea from North Korea, protected South Korea from China. So why do we feel that we owe the Koreans a living when they come to America? I've seen black tax money come back in the form of Korean investment wealth and invest in the black community. And I've seen the Koreans look upon us the way white folk look upon us, and some Negroes feel obligated to support them. You don't owe the people a living. You must know what's going on. So finally then, you must take over the economic infrastructure of your own communities, but you can't stop there because there's not enough wealth there to feed all of our people. We then must invade the general economic system itself. So the children must be educated to now take economic power from the general system. And not only then must you take that power from the general system, but you now must engage in international trade, export-import trade, to create jobs for your people and ultimately build a Pan-African economic system. Because the people that survive today are the races that have economic centers of their people across the world. See, the European not only spread African people across the world, which weakened African people, but the Europeans spread themselves across the world. But in spreading themselves across the world, they built economic networks, banking relations, commercial relations, and other kinds of relations based on their Europeanness. This is what allowed them to develop a global economic system. Now today, instead of us seeing our being spread across the world as a problem and as a weakness, it can become the source of our strength. It means then that we can build economic relations between blacks in New York City and Los Angeles and all in between blacks in America and in the Caribbean, in Central and South America, between blacks in the Caribbean and in America, with blacks in Africa and blacks all over this world. But it must be based on what? A sense of Africanness and a sense of one peopleness. And when you have that, you can, despite these statistics, begin to transform your situation. And if need be, you might be able to even move other people out of their places to make place for yourself. Even though a lot of people think that's immoral, but that's the way the world works. What can I tell you? People have not hesitated 1 minute to move us when it suited their needs. And our not moving them when it suits ours is not going to save us from being moved by them. So we have to face up to the fact that we have some dire circumstances. Yes, ma'am.
As you mentioned earlier in your lecture, the population schools now are such that these classes are overcrowded. How can we help our young people when the classes are overcrowded and teachers are quite naturally get impatient if a child is not walking a straight line and holding their hands for 6 hours and keeping quiet? How can we help them with their self-esteem when they're knocked down by the teachers in the classroom?
Well, there are a number of things we can do. Of course, the ultimate thing we must go at is try to get the teachers out of the classroom. That's a long-term goal. One of the reasons why I'm writing this book, Developmental Cycle of the Black Child, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, the next book will be Educating the African American Child for the 21st Century. Because I'm trying to lay down a rationale, a theoretical and practical basis for how black children can be educated within the context that you mentioned. I'm also trying to lay down a basis and a rationale that we can take to the schools of education and say, look, we want the curriculum of these schools changed to meet the needs of our children based on this information based on our psychology, our knowledge of ourselves. We now want to set the standards for credentials. Since whites are no longer in these schools, we do not see any reason why the standards set for white folk should any longer be operative in these schools, you see. So we have to now examine the credentials, we have to examine the teacher training, and now just as actively as we moved in the 60s against certain injustices, we now have to move intellectually and otherwise in this moment to change teacher training. The book I'm writing proposes what I call a theory of education. Do black children learn according to a different style than whites? And why do they learn that way? If we assume that they do, then what method of teaching is best for that style? Now, we have the information, we have the research information, we have the factual data to be clear on these issues. Now we have to go to the powers that be, and we have to become the powers that be and say, look, we want the schools to be restructured in this way to meet these standards. The other thing is, of course, we have to maintain surveillance. Teachers and people can only get away with that behavior if they are unwatched by a community. And if the community does not represent itself, either formally or informally, in the school situation, such that it can prevent this kind of behavior. This can only occur when parents have abandoned their educational role and are not a part of curriculum training and not a part of the standards by which children are taught and schools are run and principals are selected and teachers are fired or whatever, you see. So when parents abdicate their natural right to surveil what is going on in the school, their natural right to be a part of school governance, their natural right to go to district meetings and other meetings to demand change, then you're going to have that kind of behavior. The other thing that can be done, of course, to a great extent, the education in self-esteem, the education in self-confidence and so forth, is really the responsibility of our culture. That basically has to take place in the home and in the cultural institutions that we have, such as the institution you have here right now, you see, where both adults and youngsters are educated in the culture. This takes place in after-school programs, which can occur in the schools themselves, you see. In other words, after the formal school is over, then let the cultural education, the tutoring, the support take place. Weekend schools. Ultimately, if you've taken over the economic infrastructure of your community, if you have aggressively moved into the American economic system, if we have built the kind of trade relations with Africa and with the African diaspora, we then are in a position to exert real power in America and use that power to redesign schools. But we are also in the position to build private schools and to support the kind of schools out of our own funding that we want as a people.